Hello, everybody. Welcome to the November version of the PDP, the November session, excuse me. We have Brian DePertis here. He'll be leading us in a discussion on ethical dilemmas and leadership in the firehouse. So hopefully you're tuning in out there in Zoom land and you can participate in the discussion. I'll turn it over to Brian and he can get us started here.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for logging on. Sorry, we're a little bit late. My introduction into this is that, well, let's talk about how this came about. Joe called me up and asked me to think about doing a PDP leadership. And where did that come from, or what would that look like? And through teaching the L280 and being involved in the L380 and everything, one of the things that people always asked for was ethical dilemmas. They always want to know more, and they want to know dilemmas that have happened here. So that's kind of how we got here. And then just looking at the world at large is the second part, the small group morale, is obviously we know we've had some things happen in this time period that are causing some morale problems. And so with that, I want to say that I have no answers. I am not an expert. I am here purely because I facilitate the leadership program, and so I'm here to facilitate a discussion. So that being said, this was scheduled for 2 hours. We're like an hour and a half. Come on in. We have like an hour and a half left. If we have discussion, we'll go that whole time. If not, we're going to go ahead and we'll end early based on what it is. So welcome, Truck 50. Come on in. Truck 50 just showed up. You're going to see their backs of their heads. Okay, so with that being said, do I have to click through or what's? There's a remote, yeah. Oh, sorry, I'm not a very technical person.
We probably should have figured that out in the half hour we made people wait.
Yeah, whatever. All right, so you guys are here to talk about ethical dilemmas. So what are our goals for the day? We're going to help define what an ethical dilemma is, because believe it or not, a lot of people, like, if you don't know what an ethical dilemma is, you don't know if you've ever had one or not, or whether you're involved in. One of the things that it helps to know is if you're in an ethical dilemma or not, because otherwise, how could you potentially make a good decision? So with that, sorry, we're going to identify values. A lot of people have never thought about our own personal values, so that's going to be the hard part for some of this. But then we'll identify values for the public and values for the district. The district ones should be pretty well set up. We pretty much know what our district values are, right? So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about tools to use in ethical dilemmas. And then I have just basically 2 examples of ethical dilemmas that have been given to me that have happened here at Metro Fire. We're going to talk about, we'll talk about what were the values at risk, what were the decisions that could be made. And we'll even talk about this. There's a school of thought out there that ethical dilemmas don't actually exist, that you just have to think it through logically and there will always be a right answer. But we can talk about that too. And then the last part, crew morale, is really just, that's going to be, thank you, Truck 50, for showing up, because that really is going to be a discussion. We've obviously got a lot of things going on, and this isn't about a admin versus us thing or anything, or a wall time thing. This is about what works for you guys to keep morale up at the station level and at the company level. I have the luxury of working at a single engine company with just 3 people, so morale is maybe a little bit easier there, but obviously at a 7-person house or a 9-person house, it can be a lot more challenging. And then you guys out there in Zoom land, please chime in with that. So with that being said, let's get going. So we're going to play a video because it could probably explain what an ethical dilemma is better than I can. So Vanna.
Imagine you're watching a runaway trolley barreling down the tracks, straight towards 5 workers who can't escape. You happen to be standing next to a switch that will divert the trolley onto a second track. Here's the problem. That track has a worker on it too, but just one. What do? Do you sacrifice one person to save 5? A version of an ethical dilemma that philosopher Philippa Foot devised in 1967. It's popular because it forces us to think about how to choose when there are no good choices. Do we pick the action with the best outcome or stick to a moral code that prohibits causing someone's death? In one survey, about 90% of respondents said that it's okay to flip the switch, letting one worker die to save 5. And other studies, including a virtual reality simulation of the dilemma, have found similar results. These judgments are consistent with the philosophical principle of utilitarianism, which argues that the morally correct decision is the one that maximizes well-being for the greatest number of people. The 5 lives outweigh 1, even if achieving that outcome requires condemning someone to death. But people don't always take the utilitarian view, which we can see by changing the trolley problem a bit. This time, you're standing on a bridge over the track as the runaway trolley approaches. Now there's no second track, but there is a very large man on the bridge next to you. If you push him over, his body will stop the trolley, saving the 5 workers, but he'll die. To utilitarians, the decision is exactly the same. Lose 1 life to save 5. But in this case, only about 10% of people say that it's okay to throw the man onto the tracks. Our instincts tell us that deliberately causing someone's death is different than allowing them to die as collateral damage. It just feels wrong, for reasons that are hard to explain. This intersection between ethics and psychology is what's so interesting about the trolley problem. The dilemma and its many variations reveal that what we think is right or wrong depends on factors other than a logical weighing of the pros and cons. For example, men are more likely than women to say it's okay to push the man over the bridge. So are people who watch a comedy clip before doing the thought experiment. And in one virtual reality study, people were more willing to sacrifice men than women. Researchers have studied the brain activity of people thinking through the classic and bridge versions. Both scenarios activate areas of the brain involved in conscious decision-making and emotional responses. But in the bridge version, the emotional response is much stronger. So is activity in an area of the brain associated with processing internal conflict. Why the difference? One explanation is that pushing someone to their death feels more personal, activating an emotional aversion to killing another person. But we feel conflicted because we know it's still the logical choice. Trolleyology has been criticized by some philosophers and psychologists. They argue that it doesn't reveal anything because its premise is so unrealistic that study participants don't take it seriously. But new technology is making this kind of ethical analysis more important than ever. For example, driverless cars may have to handle choices like causing a small accident to prevent a larger one. Meanwhile, governments are researching autonomous military drones that could wind up making decisions of whether they'll risk civilian casualties to attack a high-value target. If we want these actions to be ethical, we have to decide in advance how to value human life and judge the greater good. So researchers who study autonomous systems are collaborating with philosophers to address the complex problem of programming ethics into machines, which goes to show that even hypothetical dilemmas can wind up on a collision course with the real world.
Okay, and we're back live. So what is an ethical dilemma? Based on the video, anybody want to, or you could read off the slide. Anybody want to? No? Yeah, it's a choice that doesn't necessarily have a good outcome, right? No matter what you do. And typically we talk about that there's different values at stake in that choice. So it could be yours, it could be the district's, it could be the public's when you're talking about at work. And so that's basically it. Like I said, the video does it a little bit better. What do you guys think about the driverless car part of an ethical dilemma? Pretty interesting, yeah. All right. So this is the part where we talk about discussion, right? So part of being in an ethical dilemma is recognizing you're in an ethical dilemma, right? And so one of the ways that you can set yourself up for success is by knowing what your values are. And your values might differ based on where you are in life and stuff like that, right? So I've just listed some values here, but what are some values that you guys have that affect your decision making at work? Right? So it's not necessarily that easy just to come up with what your values are.
Depends on the situation. I mean, are we on a call and we're trying to figure out the best situation?
No. He's got a lapel on. Just generalized. So for reputation, yeah, absolutely. So you definitely look at decisions and you think about how will this affect my reputation, right?
Also, what's my crew going to think about this? If it's conflicting between what the district thinks you should do, or maybe what's best for the public versus
So like
maintaining crew continuity,
continuity.
keeping everybody happy. Like, oh, well, can't we just do this real quick? You know, all those things play into your decision making. The people you're living with, you know, for
Absolutely.
those 48 hours, they have an impact on your decision.
Yeah. What about like public view? Okay. So how will this look in the public? All right. What about like, I know a lot of people will take like time off, right? When they're looking at work, like I have it listed there. One of your values might be, I enjoy my time off. I want to have my time off. My work enables me to have time off. Could that affect decisions, whether it's in the back of your mind or in the front of your mind? Stuff like that. So is there anything that like runs in the back of your mind? Because the things that we talked about first were the front of the mind stuff. Anything in the back of the mind that's not on this list that might come up with decision making?
I think some of the decisions are where we here, right? So that's your big premise. So like we're here all to serve. And so taking time off is like, okay, man, do I feel guilty because I should be here during the holidays? That's what we're here to serve. Or do I earned that, right? So those are those conflicting things. Yes, you earned that right, and you're here to serve. Tough decision.
Yeah. So, and that's some of the stuff that's going on right now, right, with staffing and whatnot. So you guys hit a lot of the stuff I had up. A lot of people, religion is going to play a factor, right? It could be in how they treat people and their belief system. Obviously, friendships, that could be like crew continuity, like you talked about, or your reputation. Some people want everything to be fair and some people don't care about that at all, right? So that could affect fun. Some people, right, they just want to have fun at work. Why do we have to do that? That's not fun. And these are things that you may not even know or run in the background, right? Or that change based on your place, right? Whether you're a firefighter, engineer, captain, some of those things might change. It might be a little bit more fun might be a little bit more important when you're in a different position versus the other. All right, so what are Metro Fire's values? You'll notice there's no bullet points here.
I have a answer to the previous discussion, but it falls in line with what you're asking here from Engine 32. And it says, do the actions that you're doing, are they in line with our core values, mission statement, service delivery, et cetera, right? So those would be Metro Fire's values or the ones that we're expected to follow, at least, you know, majority of the time, right?
Yeah, thank you, Engine 32. Yeah, that gets us into like one way that we can help us get through ethical dilemmas is making sure that those are in line and trying to pick the best one to go through that. So absolutely. So softball, what are the core values of Metro Fire?
Teamwork, integrity, professionalism, service before self.
Perfect, right? So those are the core values that are listed, right? But beyond that, right? And in case you didn't hear Mitch, I remember Pitt's professionalism, integrity, teamwork, service before self, right? So those are the ones that are listed. Those are kind of, let's call them kind of what they are, generic, right? A lot of places have those. But what has Chief Harms listed as our priorities as we go through the day? The Metro Way thing. Number one, service delivery.
Remember how it's supportive and adaptability. I don't know why I'm looking at you.
Joe, you remember?
Service delivery.
So number one, service delivery, that's a big thing to know, right? Because if all else fails, we know that we've got the professionalism, all that stuff, but our priority is number one, service delivery. Number two is training, right? And number three is taking care of each other. And then last is everything else, right? That's what has been set up as the priorities from Chief Harms down. So you've got your generic ones, right? That we've probably all had to answer in an interview question, stuff like that. Those can also be individualized to make them more to you, right? But then you also have the priorities of, does this fall in line with that, right? And we talk about incident alignment, right? So if you start thinking about this the same way, does everything line up with your personal, with the districts and with the public? And an ethical dilemma is when those things are out of alignment to talk that we're in, right? Does that make sense? All right, so possible values at risk. This is just, we kind of already listed a couple, but what are some values that could be opposed that could put us in these situations?
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so like, so for example, if you just take two of those right now, crew continuity and public interest, right? Do those always line up together with what, right? So what are some other things that could not line up? Or do we need
honesty? Sometimes we always say we never lie, never don't mislead people. But when we talk about people, when we're on, say, medical aid, and we have to tell them X, Y, Z, hey, we recommend you go to the hospital, you get seen by a doctor, we're not doctors. In that story that you give, sometimes you just want to say you should go to a clinic, but you don't want to say it because you want to make it their choice, but you have this standard that we fall by, and some of it has to do with, laws and all that stuff. So those are the dilemmas that we address every call. And that's, sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's, it can be a personal thing, like, man, we just lied to that person,
right?
Or something like that.
So that would be like public interest,
interest
and your crew interest, right? You don't want to send your crew to the hospital on something, even if it's potentially the right thing to do versus the wrong thing, right? So those are like you said, the little ethical dilemmas. So we'll just skip this one because it is kind of hard. It's pretty generic. No, you got it right. Like, it's just, oh wait, we've got to.
Well, first I have a comment from Tyler Block that says Joe is very muscular. I'm sure he's talking about me. But I have a comment. I'm not sure who it's from, but it goes along the lines of what we're talking about: personal versus public interest. For example, a mask mandate.
Okay.
Right. So I elephant in the room, whatever. Right.
Yeah.
We're not wearing one right now because we're all speaking. But do you believe that we should be wearing them? Well, you're also at work. There's county mandates. There's other things that weigh into the decisions of when we're wearing them, why we're wearing them. Right. So.
Yeah. Right. And so if you take that one, and we won't take a side on it because obviously that's very political, but let's just take it. What are the values at risk? What are the opposing values for wearing a mask? Public image.
Yeah. Personal belief plays into it, but also most of us are paramedics, right? Or EMTs. So we're taking care of public health. I mean, that's part of our job.
public health, right? And then you've got, on top of that, like we said, we've got county mandates, we've got federal mandates, what?
District policy.
District policy, right? So all those, you can start to see, this is one of those things, obviously it's out in the front right now. People may not see this as an ethical dilemma, right? But when you start putting that, what are the values opposed to each other, we start seeing that those things are out, they can be out of alignment, right? And so that actually is an ethical dilemma, and you're making a choice on that. And you just have to, one of the things about ethical dilemmas is knowing you're in one, right? And so maybe people talking about masks don't know they're in that, or maybe they do, and they're making their choice on that, right? And you have to know that when you make these choices, like we said before, you said it, Chad, that there's not always a good option, right? At least from where you're sitting. Other people may disagree with you, right? To other people, this may not be a dilemma at all. That doesn't change the fact that it's a dilemma for you. So that's, ethical dilemmas can be gray, they can be murky for you, and that doesn't mean that they are for anybody else. Does that make sense? Yeah, ethical dilemmas, absolutely. So you have to have some self-awareness to know that you're in an ethical dilemma. So that's a good one. Was there anything else, or was that the?
Nope, we're good to move on.
Okay, perfect. So, sorry, how do we get into ethical dilemmas? So, zero deficit mindset. Does that need explanation?
You just have your stance and you're not even going to bother looking at the other side of something.
That's one thing of it. So the other part about a zero deficit mindset is that you're a perfectionist, right? It's another word for perfectionist. So everything has to be perfect. So this is more like maybe if you get into projects or studies or something like that, and you're put in this situation, or you've been given a project and you want this thing to be perfect. It's not going perfect. So maybe you see a corner that you could cut to get there to make it look perfect. Would you take that shortcut to make it perfect, right? And maybe it's not on yourself, right? Maybe that's imposed. So maybe your boss gives you something, they expect it to be perfect. You go to them, you tell them, hey, I'm experiencing these problems, and they don't care. They just say, get it done. You see how that could potentially put you in a place where some dilemmas are going to come up. So this is along the same lines, not given adequate resources for a task. So you're expected to get a task done, but you don't have enough to do it. How are you going to get it done?
I think that's kind of what we specialize in.
Yeah. So it can be what we specialize in, and how might it put us in a place where there's a dilemma, though?
I think you spoke on it earlier, so cutting corners, we're still going to achieve the ultimate goal of finishing it, but it may not be as adequate. We're just going to get it done with what we have the best we can.
You're going to compromise something, an ethics, or compromise somebody else, or a risk.
Yeah.
For sure.
So
For us, it's just overwork. We're just going to overwork ourselves to get a task done.
So you're compromising yourself in that one, right? Your health,
Yeah.
your time with your family, and something like that. Evidently, Joe doesn't talk loud enough. You get two mics. So,
It's 'cause he has no neck,
yeah.
no voice box.
Outside pressures, those are kind of just encompasses what we just talked about. Is there any other examples of outside pressures out there in Zoom land or here?
No, not yet. So they're ready to share, though. I can tell. Yeah, family pressure to have to, let's say you worked the last 3 Christmases, and your family wants you to be home for this one, and whether or not to take it off or not, or block it,
Or not pick up your phone,
or not pick up your phone.
come up with an excuse that's not.
Who are you going to disappoint? Your family, or your fire family?
Yeah.
Or yourself? Yeah.
Yeah, so family can be an outside pressure for sure. Absolutely. It's a lot of smiling there, man, Freddie. I'll call you out. And then not having clear set values. So if you don't have clear set values when you get into a spot where you have a choice, what are you going to back up your decisions with? And this is what Chad said, some self-awareness, right? So we need to take some time and come up with what are our values, right? Because otherwise, if our values are constantly changing, not just, of course our values change as things change in life. But if you don't have that clear set of values, then when situations come up, what do you fall back on? How do you make that decision?
And in the firehouse, sometimes, right, the loudest person, that their opinion is going to be the one that's most listened to.
Absolutely.
You don't have a clear line.
Absolutely.
It happens, not all the time, but it happens.
Or how do you keep yourself accountable if you don't have those values or they're all over the place? So you never really have a stance. And then the loudest voice is the stance.
Absolutely.
Or no stance, and that's even worse.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. If you don't have a stance, you could get yourself into troubles too. Or, so that could be from any rank, right? But if you are a supervisor, a captain, or a battalion chief, if you have no stance and you let the loudest choice win, or the loudest voice win, that now became your choice. You just let someone else make that choice for you, and now you have to live with the consequences for that. So one of the reasons why setting those personal values, I know it sounds silly, but actually sitting down and go like, what are the things that are important to me? When things come down, what do I want to protect? How do I make those decisions, right? So for me, obviously, family is, my number one before anything else. So one of the things we'll see when we talk about getting through ethical dilemmas, that's one of the things that I use is I go, what would my family think of me with this decision? Speaking of that, how do we navigate ethical dilemmas? So we've talked a lot about already, recognize that you're in an ethical dilemma. And then realize that ethics is rarely black and white. So what I mean by that is when we're sitting here and we're talking about it, or you're at the fire station in an engine and you hear about a decision that people have made, it's very easy to say, I would never make that decision, right? Like that's not it. Like I would never do that. That's dumb. Until you put yourself in that situation. And if you can't put yourself in that situation, it's going to be black and white. But when you get in those situations, those answers may not be clear, right? Mm-hmm. What are some factors that would make answers not clear in one of those? Like one I'll just throw out there is time compression, right? Typically, especially if they're job-related decisions, there's a clock involved. Experience? Elaborate.
In so many words, being thrown to the wolves in the beginning of your career and having to make.
I don't even know how to use this. Just having to make some serious decisions without having those memories in your toolbox. Like as years go on and we're in this profession, we kind of base a lot of our decisions on past experiences. When you're new to this career, you just don't have those Rolodexes, if you will, to make certain decisions.
Perfect. So one decision that might in the beginning of your career might seem gray, might later
1,000%.
turn into more.
1,000%.
Perfect. Any other?
I think fear, a lot of, for me, fear,
One.
Fear. I think fear because sometimes the decisions you've never made before, you want to make the wrong decision. And not even just at work, but at home or finances or whatever it is. Fear plays a lot of it. How comfortable are you to put that amount of risk out there? Some people are like, wow, I want to be like that guy. He's fearless. Right? But how are you? And that's how we make decisions a lot is, it's like, man, if I don't do this, or if I do this, what are the consequences? Am I willing to accept that? And that's, so I think fear.
Yeah. So it's like
being wrong.
Yeah. Fear of being wrong, like fear of regret. And then there's buyer's remorse, right? The same thing. Like, hey, you made that decision. Now you bought it. So you gotta live with all those, right? Any other things that you can see that might make it more gray than black and white?
I think having like personal reflection and realizing if you did make a decision out of the compressed time or out of fear, is being humble enough to admit that you were wrong and be able to kind of fall on the sword and work through it. You know, somebody comes to you with pretty much open hands, like, hey, I screwed this up really bad, versus keeping that hard stance and being like, I know I was wrong, but I'm sticking to it anyway. I think it's a little easier to show up kind of palms open and be like, hey, I'm, you know, kind of asking for forgiveness here. I learned from that mistake. I want to move forward, versus not admitting it and just sticking with it the entire time and being real stubborn about it.
Yeah. Cool. So, and then we're going to talk about we've kind of been talking about this. What plays roles in our ethical decision making? Does anyone know what unconscious bias is? So if you're looking for a book to read, Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. He's an amazing psychologist who won a Nobel Prize in economics based on a lot of his stuff. And an unconscious bias is something, obviously unconscious, don't know you have it, right? And a bias is a preference for something. So unconscious biases can get us in trouble because biases mean we have a preference for something without weighing the other side of it, right? So if you're presented with something that you're already more likely to pick and something else, can that potentially get us into problems, right? And that comes into the self-introspection, right? Like, hey, I know that I have a likelihood to pick this in these situations, even when this other option is available. So we can't even necessarily tell you what your unconscious biases are. You can start to think about them, but some of it is going to absolutely be from experiences. I've put myself in this situation before. I've been here before. I know that I'm more likely to pick this outcome. And that doesn't mean that that's the wrong outcome. What that means is that you have to realize that you have a propensity for picking something over the other. And is this a situation where that's the right thing? Is this going to help me, or is this not? And when we're talking about time compression, you have to realize that even more, right? When we utilize shortcuts in our brain all the time, and those shortcuts are evolved to keep us alive, but they can also be very, very wrong. So that's the unconscious bias. So you have to realize in these decision makings that you are, whether you like it or not, programmed probably already to pick something. And that could be for your self-interest. And then, so if it's for self-interest, what's the other values at risk? Right? Is it the public interest? Is it the district values? Stuff like that. And then custom and practice. Any guesses on what that means?
Our culture. This is how we always done it.
Exactly. This is how we've always done it. This is our culture. These are the patients we try and code for, or this is what we do in this situation, right? And so those are how we make decisions, right? And that's exactly what you're talking about with experience, right? When we have brand new firefighters, we're about to be hit with how many new firefighters in the next year and a half, 2 years. And some of them will be laterals that have custom and practice built up from somewhere else that may or may not fit in with us. And it's a time that they don't know ours, and they're going to start to learn it. And these decisions are going to start to be set in their brains before they even know it. It's going to become the way that they do things when it doesn't have to be if it's a bad thing. Does that make sense? So custom and practice, once again, can be very good, right? But are there some things that, we don't have to call out custom and practice right now. This isn't a culture thing. But are there some things that are custom and practices that we know could be better? Yeah, probably, right? So just knowing that those play roles in your decision making will help you go through your ethical dilemma if we're not in a huge time crunch, right? Because some of them, like I said, we are, is when you take that step back, you can go, what am I more likely to choose without thinking anything else? You know, what would custom and practice say, is that the right thing in this, right? So you already start to know, you start to weed some of those out as being either good or bad in this situation. Talk it out, your phone a friend, right? I know as a new captain, I had several people that were my phone a friends, and it could be for, hey, I don't know how to do this report, or it could be, hey, I've never been in this situation before. So I assumed you guys all have people you call in these, talk to.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's very, very important to have, even if it's not a captain, even if it's
Absolutely.
a senior person who's been here a while, or somebody in your academy, even you guys have kind of come up the same way. Go, hey man, I'm stuck with this. What do you think of this, or what do you think of that? And you get at least a different perspective that you may not see.
Absolutely, right?
So,
Or your truck captain, your truck crew today. What do you guys think?
yeah, we're late. Whose fault was that?
Drivers.
So yeah, talking out important, right? I mean, I guess that's post-action, but in the peer support world, you guys talk about talking it out a lot, right? Like that's a lot of what you do.
Yeah.
So it's almost like pre-incident planning for peer support. Talk it out, right? What can I do here? And obviously, talk to people who you know are going to steer you in a good direction.
Right. Well, I think a lot of guys that work here, people that work here, ego gets in the way of that. I don't want to, you're afraid if you call for help, you go, oh, that guy's, they're going to talk like this. Brian doesn't know what the hell he's doing over there down at 50. He's having issues that I perceive as simple. And obviously it's not simple, or whatever blockage I'm having, you get stuck,
Yeah.
So having, I guess, I don't know if it's courage or whatever well, like you were saying, get rid of that ego a little bit, and I can ask Chad for help. What am I missing here? I don't, we're all working together. I just make decisions when I have to make a decision.
So what would help for people who have a problem with that? What would help people
Get rid of their
reach
ego?
out? I don't know if we can get rid of egos,
Yeah,
but
I know.
what would help people reach out to other people if they're,
It's a personal choice. I mean, you can't force somebody to reach out. You just offer it to them. Let them know that you're there to help. But if it's their choice, I mean, they decide if they want to call you or not, or ask for help. If they want to continue to keep doing it the way they're doing it, then it's unfortunately your hands are kind of tied there. You can show them a different way if you're there, but
so I guess offering help is what I'm hearing, right? Being one to offer help is one thing.
it's still a personal choice. Though.
Absolutely, personal choice. If you're someone who has a hard time asking for help, or someone like that, what advice would you give them moving forward? Like they're not in the situation yet.
I think it would be to offer it, to say, hey, you've had this issue before, and give them reasons. Don't just give a blanket statement, but give them specific times. Like, hey, you had this issue. Why didn't you call me? Why didn't you ask for help?
Yeah.
So you think of somebody that's, they're moving or something like that, and they're having their wife move all the furniture with them. You're like, I live up the street. Why wouldn't you have called me? At least ask.
Yeah.
If we're talking work specific here at the fire department, I think it's building those relationships with either your crew, your battalion chief, or your battalion in general, and just building that trust and that relationship with the individuals around you. And so when you are stuck, okay, I know I can talk to Brian. I've done some drills with them. We've talked about some strategy and tactics, some stuff that's just shooting the breeze or whatever. I feel like some of that's getting lost. I don't know if it's phone related. I don't know if it's guys are on their iPads all the time, but that in person, I mean, look how many people are here compared to on Zoom. That in-person conversation and building those relationships is kind of starting to fall to the wayside. So who do you trust? I might tell this person I'm having a problem. They're going to go on the Instagram and pop it out there. Is it on the Instagram or just Instagram?
No, I think you hit it on the head. The personal relationship part, I think, is huge, right?
Yeah.
And so if I was giving someone advice that I didn't know, that I didn't have that personal relationship with, it would be find someone who you trust that you can go to with these problems. And inside or outside of work is probably good, or probably having both, right? It probably helps to have people you trust, even if it's a work issue. If you have someone outside of work, they can probably bring another perspective that you don't have.
Right.
And one of the things that I've talked about before, not necessarily today, is I want people who think differently than me, and I want people who I trust who think differently than me. And sometimes that means being outside of work, right? Because if you think the same as me, then we're going to come up with the same issue, and we're not going to see the other side of the coin, right? So we may not, that may be the thing. We don't know we're in a true ethical dilemma or how deep it is until we talk to someone from the outside, right? And that could make it more gray, or that could make it more black and white, right? And that's why talking it out helps with that. Utilitarian theory. So the video hit that pretty hard, right? So that's one way. This decision, what does the best for the most people, knowing that it's not going to be good for everybody, right? So that works pretty well, but it's not always practical for the way we think. And that you have to look at what are the values at risk, right? You have to know who is going to be hurt and who is going to be not hurt to know that, right? It's not always as simple as a train's going to run over 5 people versus 1 person. And then understand duties and obligations, headline approach. So that is literally, I mean, I remember early on in my career, there was a lot of headlines about fire departments, be it our fire department or neighboring fire departments, about decisions. So it's, if this decision were to make a headline, how would it look? Right? It's that simple. Like, I don't know what to do. Well, if this was a headline, would it be a good headline or would it be a bad headline? It's pretty simple, right? Sorry.
I brought your water to you right there.
Thank you. Pot kettle. And family and friends approach, right? Like, if you told your family and friends the decision you made, how would they feel about it, right? Are there any other things that we didn't hit that you guys would throw in there to
Yeah, I
navigate
think
through ethical
understanding your
dilemmas?
duties and obligations. So what's your role within your team or within the department or within your family? What are you self-designated, or what's been designated, and what's your obligation to that team? I think that weighs on it as well. You brought up the one earlier about the call, going to a medical aid versus a fire, and you're dispatched on the medical aid, and you have this option to go to a fire instead. Is what's the best for the public, and that's the dilemma, right? The guy in the back seat wants to go to the fire. But it's your decision now. If you're the captain, you're the one making that choice of, no, this is what we're going to do based on what information you have too.
Yeah, absolutely. So that one is discussed heavily in L280, so we're not going to discuss that one too much. L280,
I thought I was
December
giving you a
8th and
segue
9th.
there, but I guess not.
It is a good segue. Well, it's a good segue because we're going to talk about some that have been happened here at Metro Fire. So what we'll do is we're gonna talk about 2 of them, and we will just, what are the values at risk, and then how would we navigate through? Okay, so the first one is you're a captain, and the day's just started, and you're getting there, and your engineer comes up to you and he says, "Hey, I need to go home on emergency leave." Most of us, easy decision, right? Sometimes do we not even ask what it is, right? Because we trust our guys, but you find out a little bit more. You find out, well, your engineer's wife has a dead battery in her car. Okay. then so is there an ethical, would you guys let a guy go home for a wife with a dead battery?
So I'm thinking he's already, by presenting this issue, I think he's already phoning a friend right now by saying, hey, this is basically the problem. And right at that point, yes, you would step in and say, okay, let's figure out a different solution other than you going home. Let's try and exhaust some other options before we pull the handle and actually send you away. This is, you know, what's the situation? Is she in a dangerous area and you need to go and like help her? Or is this dead battery at your house? Everybody's fine. It's not an emergent situation. Let's go through some different options. Can you call AAA? Can you call a friend? Is it close enough where we could send maybe an engine over, somebody else within the district go and help her? Like there's definitely some options that you could probably weigh before sending that person home to help with the battery.
So you're doing that and you find that they have the car's at home. They have roadside assistance, but it's going to be a few hours. And they don't have any pressing needs to go anywhere.
What's the problem?
You got a guy who's asking you to go home to fix his wife's dead battery.
Right. So I think being presented with that, we could still do some other options. So like I said, is this within district and we're actually able to help? Is this close enough to where we could even go and, you know, effectively help? Is there another family, a friend, maybe even you have somebody, you know, a captain's like, yeah, I actually know somebody who lives over there. Would you be comfortable with me calling my friend and having him come over and help? I think it's just having that trust and building up that relationship with that person. Do they trust you enough to help them with that?
So what are the values at risk though, right? Because you tell this guy they can't go home now. What are the consequences of that decision? Okay, if you let them go home, you're dropping it down to 2, right?
Well, there are going to be other options that can happen with that, but it's going to be short-staffed at that station for up to 4 hours.
Okay, perfect. So, and so what can happen if you're down at 2? Is running at 2 as good as running at 3?
God, I hope not.
We can also argue it's not in our MOU to run an engine with 2. That's all this problem.
Yeah. Plus, it's just going to be one person on an engine.
It could be fires or a PD code or a drowning or God knows what, you know, anything can happen in 4 hours.
Absolutely. Okay. So that could be what happens if you let him go, right?
Correct.
So what is a consequence of not letting him go?
You start losing that crew continuity.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So crew continuity, there's also something that someone said earlier. What about your reputation?
That could be a factor.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
if people, do you think that guy's going to then go and start spouting wonderful things about you to the rest of the people in the district?
If that's something you value and you worry about.
But what about the guy with the guy with the dilemma? I mean, his values about staying at work or leaving for that kind of thing. I mean, that shows, I think that's like a different, I mean, he signed up for this job to be here for 24 hours to 48 hours. I mean, there's that side of it too, you know,
So
there's 2 sides of it, but
yeah. So I think what gets lost sometimes in this is like he comes to you and he says, this is the issue. And you have all this conversation, you figure out what the actual issue is. And if you just say no and walk away,
That's different.
well, then then there's no emotion in there at all. Instead of having that conversation, look, I'd love to do that for you, but here's why I can't let you do that. And having that conversation, so at least he knows the why. He may not like it, he may not agree with it, and he can be upset about it and pass whatever he wants around the district. But at least you've had that conversation with him. And so when it pops up through the room, he'll go, I heard you didn't let so-and-so go home. Go, yeah, I had a conversation with him. I made it clear on why I said no.
Yeah.
And having that open conversation, like I said, he may not like it, but he'll understand where you're at, you know, and I'll bet you if something changes, then yeah, go ahead and go. We'll figure something else out.
Right. You need to exhaust other options.
But that's kind of what my thing is, building that relationship with him, to be able to have that conversation with him, as opposed to just like, nope, I'm the captain. Sorry, can't go.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, and not closing that loop on why.
Yeah.
I have
So-
a comment from Dave Bear out there. He says he would trust his crew member that that's the only option.
Right.
Assume that he's already exhausted all the other options and will adjust. So that's, it kind of depends on your relationship with your crew member, I guess is what he's getting at. But and then Chief Vestal's weighing in too. He said that what mechanisms are in place to support people, emergency leaves there for a reason, right? Fourth from the truck can be used to maintain service delivery. Emergencies happen, need to support your family. So, you're using all these different factors to help solve problems. Call your BC. Hey, is this something that we can do, and we can move people around if it's something that
Yeah.
we need to do, right?
Absolutely, right? So there are sometimes things that make those ethical decisions, they can make it easier, right? Or harder, but that's what we talked about, reaching out for help, right?
Mhm.
So sometimes it's help in solving it. And I'm not saying don't send people home to help out their family. That's
Right.
not at
No.
all what I'm saying.
Right.
But those are the types of things that maybe that's a borderline thing that put us in that situation, right? Before I go another example, do you guys have any examples of ethical dilemmas that have been around you guys in your career? Out in Zoom land? So while you guys are thinking about that, so this one, you're part of a crew, you're not the captain, right? You're an engineer, firefighter, and you've noticed that people are, a certain individual is coming to work. He's a friend, part of your crew. He's coming to work. Maybe he's coming to work hungover. Maybe he's starting to get to the point where he comes in and he goes to bed for a few hours before he starts coming, or you start noticing an odor of alcohol on him or something else. At what point in time do you address it with him? At what point in time do you address it with a captain or a battalion chief? And what are the values at risk in those decisions? Joe?
After he crashes the rig, a good time
Jeez,
talk to him about it.
All right.
I would disagree.
What do you think, Ryan? I mean, you've been around people that have had some
Yeah.
struggles, right? So addressing things as early as you can, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's your crew member you care about.
Yeah, I mean, if that's something I notice, I'm gonna have to, I have to address it immediately. That's how I feel about it. How can I, in clear conscience, just go, I don't even know if he's intoxicated right now. He smells like it. He's sleeping. Who knows? But if something happens and I don't do anything about it, I mean, maybe that's a selfish way to look at it. But we all have a job to do. We're counting on him to perform a job. We're already 3 on an engine. We're already not fully
So
staffed.
does it change, like if this is a once-off, right, versus this is now a more common occurrence? This is not just once. Does that
It
change?
does, but even the once off, if I smell an odor, well, especially in my position, but you have to address it. Just because, is he ready to work? Is he not?
I guess what I'm getting at is like a once-off is like kind of easier. Hey, use sick leave, go home,
Yes.
right? This is not a normal thing.
Right.
Like obviously there could be some bigger issues, but go home, we're done, right?
Mm-hmm.
What happens when this is now a common occurrence?
Yeah, we gotta get him some help.
Start calling this guy over here, potentially.
Start calling a chief, right?
Well,
So
yeah. I mean,
what are the values at risk though? Like what are you risking?
He potentially could be mad at you, right? So he maybe would feel like you're ratting him out or something like that. But like Ryan said, I mean, we've all took an oath, all show up ready, fit for duty, right? And so he's already breaking that, that rule. So I don't think it's really that big of a gray area as far as hurting his feelings. He's the one that made the choice. He's the one that showed up. He's the one that chose to, come intoxicated or smell like alcohol. But I think the biggest thing is, how do we help this person, right? So how are we going to help him or her moving forward from here? So we recognize the issue. Now we're going to address the issue. And then how do we treat the issue? So I think the biggest thing is getting this individual some help, you know, and they're having that hard of a time showing up to work without being intoxicated or smelling like alcohol. We need to step in and do something here. It's no longer in that person's hands. It's now in our hands. We're going to address the issue. So I think, yeah, involving the battalion chief absolutely would be helpful. Peer support, you know, there's lots of things out there that, you know, lots of options to help.
Yeah.
I think what you're at, like you're trying to get at the values that are at risk there. It's the crew, it's at the individual and everybody else on that crew, even with them, it's the public, because they have an expectation for us to be ready to respond, and we're not right now because we're having this issue, and it's the district's values, and so they're all in the bowl to be played with right now, and they're kind of getting, you have to deal with it. You can't just let it go.
Yeah. It's exactly what I was getting at. It's kind of, it's a personnel issue, but it's also a personal issue, right? Especially if this is a crew member and a friend.
Yeah.
And we all know we've been on calls with people like this, and maybe there's people who've been in your life. If they're not ready to hear that information,
Sure.
you have to be prepared. The biggest one I see is you have to be prepared to lose a friend on that. Right? Like to me, that's the biggest thing. That's what makes that one a hard decision is I could lose my friend over this. And I'm picking something over that friendship right now, even if it's the best thing for him. Does that make sense on that?
Yeah, but I would argue, at least the way I would look at it is I know I'm technically making the choice, but I'm not really making that decision. You know, at that point, whatever issues you have, let's help you get whatever help you need to get. And if you decide after this that we're not going to be friends, that's fine. I'm fine with that. But for me, it's an easy decision, I guess.
Yeah, and it's probably something that's been thought about before for some people, right? So that always helps it be a little bit easier. But you're absolutely right. You're going through ways, you're going through steps of making this their decision and not yours, right? That you're justifying that. And this is one of those ones that, in my personal opinion, it sounds really easy when we're right here. And I think that becomes very different when you're put in that situation.
Absolutely.
And so that's one of the reasons that we talk about things now. And obviously you can't talk about every decision. That's where you talk about values, right? Because you are now putting the district values and the public values ahead of some of those values of friendship, right? Friendship is, on this decision at least, lower in that hierarchy than those other things, whether it's because you're at work, whether it's because that's just who you are, you know, or whether it's because you feel a duty. You're hoping that that's not going to ruin the friendship, but you have to realize that that's a possibility, right?
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, what would you do if let's say they showed up to your house, let's say they drove to your house and they were supposed to take your kid somewhere and you smelled alcohol, you know, would you be okay with that? They're driving, you know, they're an operator, or they're going to hop on the medic, they're operating a vehicle, you know, under the influence.
Absolutely.
So to me, it's not, I think hopefully they would get some clarity after the fact to realize that we were making the choice for them in their best interest and for the district and for public. But ultimately, like Ryan said, we didn't put us in this situation, they did.
Right.
I think we make this decision sound like it's going to happen overnight, right? You're dealing with each other. It's, you know, you deal with your crew and how that evolves for our service, and then you're at the end. But that thing is not going to take. It's not going to be within the hour, right? It's going to be weeks, maybe a month, and you're kind of like, okay, how do we deal with this? Well, I got to take care of this guy and my crew, and then how does that affect our service? This doesn't happen like within a half hour.
Right.
But it might be like you're going home or you're dressing.
The first part of it.
But it is a long thing, and that's how it should be, right? It shouldn't be. We're all about breaking doors now.
Right.
That's a slow. Let's go slow and really find the resources with like Ryan and his group, and you know the district has a lot of resources, and then your crew, you know, his friends, his horror friends. So it's a slow thing, and it's not easy. I mean, I can't say I've ever been through it, but we can all put ourselves in that kind of position.
Yeah.
So.
Cool.
I had a comment from Zoomland out there. The risk by not taking action to get definitive help intervention could be significantly worse than not taking action. DUI, accident, loss of career, family impact.
Absolutely.
And I would argue that for me, and if I'm in that position, that my family values do come into play with that. Because if I know about it and I don't do anything, now my job is at risk and all. I mean, there's a whole bunch of downside as opposed to losing a friend. You don't want to lose a friend, but the downside is tremendous.
Absolutely. Were there any other ethical dilemmas that came up in there?
No, but I think we could probably come up with one as a group. I think.
I mean, we probably could, or we could move on to the small group morale thing.
Okay, let's do it. Moving on.
Take a short break.
You're in charge.
So, I think we've given tools and we've
Yeah, for sure.
kind of beat this to death. I'm sorry about my cough.
Absolutely.
I know.
No comments.
Yeah,
What if you
no
have
comments from
COVID and you
Disneyland on
come
that.
to
Okay. So small group morale. So basically this one, there's no slides, there's no discussion. I really just want to hear from people. There's a lot of experience out there in this room. Obviously we can't change what's going on around us as far as the bigger world, be it admin, contract, politics, all that stuff, wall times. So what are things that you guys have found that work to improve morale at your station? Like for me, it's right now I work at a 3-person house. We all get along. It's really easy. Like we still talk about hard things, but we set, rules and we know when to stop, and then we get our work done. We do our training and we play games. We play cribbage at Station 54. It breaks a lot of the tension. But I know in the past, Carl, you've gone through times when you were at 53 with a low morale in the district. What did you do for morale for you guys at a 5-person house?
Well, as I'm making it up on the fly, I'm going to call it the Pat Anderson theory. Like we put hockey on and we play games. No, I think it's very much what you're saying. I think we keep ourselves away. And if when you're talking about 53, that's when the economic downturn, we've had people who just got laid off. We haven't hired in a while. Firefighters are working just like they are now, a ton of time. Like, hey, guess what? I'm going to do you a favor. I'm going to keep you at 53, and it's your 4th day there. It's the same thing as now. Yeah. Cities' engines are getting browned out. Crews are getting tired. I think for me, and this is my thing, is if you want to say play games, I say training, doing things together. Really, if you're together and as a group, it seems like you get through these hard times easier. Like I think of that as a fun time where I've met some great individuals, and I will always cherish that. I still cherish it. And when I see them, I make a big effort to say hi, because I don't want to say suffer together, but we did have a hard time together, and we did it together through training, working out, being empathetic and trying to put them in good positions. And for example, would be that time we just had TRQ start. So I was able to farm out those guys off the ambulance to go get their TRQ. I think that was a good, and it's like nowadays the same thing. I can think of 101 currently on the B shift. Those guys wanted to get their TRQ, so they're coming to 106. They have an opportunity to get off the ambulance and just take a different break. I think those things, for me, helped at 53 when it was really tough, but it doesn't change that those guys are still working 96 hours.
Absolutely. No, yeah.
They're answering the phone every day. It doesn't change, but you do it together, I think. And then put yourself last. I know I sat in that office. A 53 is special to me because you can sit in the captain's office. I could open the door and they're goofing around or jabbing each other, and you're part of it. But so you can listen to what their needs are, and I think that's important, is to listen and put them ahead of you, put the crews ahead of you, and then how we deliver that service, and you're last. And I think for me, that's how I did it. I'm not saying that's it for everybody, but I think those are some important things to remember out there, that just listen to the guys.
Man, this is brainstorming, so there's no right or wrong answers. So
it's my manifesto.
I like it. Ryan, what about you?
I agree with Carl. I think training is the best thing. I mean, it's a little different when you're a 3-person house. We've got 9 guys there, so there's always something to train on. But what I found at 50, and I can see it when we haven't trained in a while, is that the morale kind of just, it's not even a low morale, it's just kind of a low grade, not depression, but just, everything is kind of quiet and like, okay, we're just kind of going through the motions and we're doing our 2 days. But when we go out and do some good hard training where we're all suited up and questioning each other, and I'll make Chad do a drill, and I'll make Mitch do a drill, and I'll go, you guys are in charge now, talk it up. Or, we drag Arso out on the roof, tell me how we do this. And it kind of gets everybody engaged and stuff. And you can just see it, everybody kind of come together. And you see it at the dinner table. We turn the TV off, or we'll have Joe put on, polar bears or volcanoes or something. So it's not TV on, and we're all just, you can see the bonding happen at the firehouse. I do agree with Carl now that with firefighters working 96 hours or 72 hours at a time, you have to adjust that a little bit. We did that over the summer. And yes, guys are tired, but I also found that the morale was still low. And so I was like, screw it, we're going to start training again, even if it's only for a half hour. We're going to go out and do stuff. And maybe I'm projecting that on, like, oh yeah, morale looks better. I don't know, but it feels better. To me, it feels like the guys are closer. The guys are talking to each other. You can see it in the workout room. If you just come and do your 48 hours and everybody's in their rooms, on their phones, watching TV and not engaging and doing anything, to me, you're kind of missing the point, at least why I got into this job, which was to go out and play. I mean, we get to drive a truck and plan an engine and play with all these tools. Let's go do stuff. If we're not going to burn stuff down, let's go practice and pretend like we are and challenge each other and bond that way. To me, training is the best way to build morale. It gets guys out there. They're not just running calls all the time. It challenges them a little bit, and they kind of, they get to. And for me, I'm trying to get these guys into that leadership role a little bit. Run it. Let's see we have a probie now. You guys are in charge. You're mentoring him.
Yeah.
So it's just, for me, it seems to fire guys up a little bit more.
I have a comment from the folks out there. They say crew appreciation sets. Captains cook all meals. Captains take care of non-transport and no patient found PCRs. I'm like, all right.
All right.
Who's that from?
I don't know.
Huh?
It does. Tyler Craft? No. I don't know who it is. So
Is it Danielle?
they'll remain anonymous. Someone from your crew, maybe. Yeah.
No, I mean, I think that's always a good thing. Captains taking some of that stuff off.
Dustin Rodriguez, he took credit for it.
Well, I mean, and you've read a lot of military books and leadership books. They all say this. You start reading them, it's the same thing in every book. Train your guys, train them hard. Don't overtrain them. You got to find that happy medium, but it builds morale. It builds confidence in each other. It builds trust in each other. All that stuff just builds, as opposed to just like, let's just not do anything today.
Yeah.
So.
Chad, how's it?
Well, I would agree with what he's saying, but I think that what he is saying is that when we do go out and train,
I would agree with what my captain's saying, but do I have to repeat?
Statement.
But I think it gives us purpose, and I think purpose is important when we're talking about morale, because I think when we, if we have like a few dry months of, just the monotonous run-of-the-mill medical aids, no fires, we're at work, we're kind of drained from all the overtime, stuff like that. If we feel like we don't have purpose, I feel like that's when I go home and I'm like, I didn't feel like I didn't do much or whatever. And I feel like when we do go out and train, and it's fun and it's good to hang out with the guys, because that's why a lot of us got into this. But it feels like I have purpose. I feel like I go home and I feel like, wow, I did something. And then I think obviously working out as well, health and wellness is important, and a lot less news, because that could be really negative. So seriously. So
No,
anybody else?
yeah, Mitch, what works for you?
Told you, Pat Anderson theory. Just put hockey on. No politics.
Baseball.
Yeah, so everybody kind of hit
baseball.
the nail on the head with the, getting out and training together and working out together also. But like I was talking about with somebody else, like some of my best memories here was working at some of the smaller houses. I haven't always enjoyed working at like the 111 or some of the bigger houses where crews are a little bit more spread out, but some of the best times have been at like 41, 101, 50. We still all get together around the table, or we can all get in the gym together and stuff and doing stuff together as a team.
Petty, I'm going to make you say something.
Yes. Best thing for morale is fire. By far.
Joe's got a mic. What do you
Yeah.
got? To
I agree.
Fire, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I would say
We can't control that though, hopefully.
Yeah. Obviously, being a newer captain, but I tried to set the precedent, so we're going to train in the morning, kind of the day started appropriately, and set that precedent early so it's not a shock. You know, it's not, hey, we're going to train sometime today, but give them a specific time as to when we're going to do it, and then what we're going to train on, and then empower your people. It's already been said, but have them lead a drill. Come up with a topic and say, hey, do you feel comfortable leading this? We're going to go over to 21. We're going to run a search drill. Do you feel comfortable doing drags and teaching bailing out windows and stuff like that? It's more or less getting everybody kind of maybe not even comfortable, get them a little uncomfortable and kind of pressure them and get them out of their comfort zone and have them learn something. And especially, I think everybody feels gratified when they teach somebody something and they use that, throughout their career. But then also giving them that chance to have downtime. Hey, we're going to get a workout in a day. We're going to shop. We're going to get some training in. But the day's yours after that. If you've got homework you need to do, but giving them that decompression time also, where maybe they do need that 20 minutes, 30 minutes to be by themselves and read and kind of reset. But it's always good to check in with your crew too, right? See how their day was before. Are they in the middle of a 96? Or they just get off medic 53 or 24? Or any medic really at this point, and kind of check in with them and see where they're at mentally right now. And, maybe the training was going to be, we're going to go, throw ladders all day. And they go, well, I'm kind of banged up. They go, okay, well, let's do some recliner training. Let's put on some YouTube videos. Let's talk about being first in, second in. You can always challenge them in that too. So dictate the training based on how the crew's feeling that day is pretty important as well.
Sweet. Thank you guys. Chief Farika.
So I agree with everything that everybody said so far, but another thing I think that's really important to do is when you start getting that negative vibe in the firehouse, redirect that energy. I mean, the troops have got to vent. I get that. There's a lot going on, a lot of outside influences that impact them. But at some point, that negativity and that negative conversation that's going on in the firehouse, it becomes cancerous. And so then you have to redirect that attention and divert that so that it doesn't just continue to grow that negativity. So, there's options there. Again, the training's a good one, just to redirect the conversation. You talked about contracts. I remember a few contracts ago, as there was controversy related to whatever was being negotiated at the time. The guys would come in around the kitchen table every morning and they'd gripe and complain about what was going on. But if you could redirect that conversation, let them vent for a little bit and then redirect it, and it would change the tone of the day at the firehouse. Otherwise, the guys would sit around and they'd complain about it all day. And then that negativity, like I says, it just builds upon itself and it becomes a bigger problem. So you got to redirect that negative energy.
Absolutely. Cool. Anything else in Zoom land? Thank you, Chief. I think that concludes our PDP.
Yes. Well, what do you think?
There we go.
Morale. Other than
Let
playing
me
games.
guess. If because I had Dupe work at 106 when the engine was shut down. If you would just say to Dupe and Chris Allen and whoever was with us, what do you guys want to do? And that always helped. Right?
Yeah.
What do you want to do?
Just let the crew do what they want to do. That's
What do you want to do?
absolutely- Yeah.
That's
No.
risky.
Yeah, it can be risky. No, I think training is huge. I think training on new things, putting people in new situations, is a good thing. I think you guys kind of all hit it. It's nuanced, right? I think the biggest thing is what Ryan talked about at the beginning with some of the other stuff. It's building that relationships. It's letting your crew know that they are cared for. It's knowing that they had something over their 4-day, asking how it went, asking them questions about it, knowing what's going on in their life. And that goes up and down. It doesn't mean that it's the captain always asking. It's, it goes both ways. Firefighters, engineers asking that same thing. And it's creating that family environment, right? And I've said it before, like, I want people that are different than me. I like people with opposing views. But it's knowing how to have a conversation. Because I think sometimes those uncomfortable conversations are good to have. and that you need to have them, whether they're work related or life related, some things like that. But it's having ground rules on how to get through those conversations and knowing when they need to stop. And then, like Chief Barika said, okay, now let's redirect into something else. So I think it's, for me, training, like you said, is huge, but I think the biggest thing is the personal relationship and having your guys know that you care and finding ways to show that you care to the guys. Like I said, up or down, doesn't matter what position you're in. If you're a brand new probationary firefighter, that's one way to get in with your crew and to start knowing is, hey, not only do I care about my job and doing good at my job, but I care about you as people. And I think that sometimes we miss that if we don't make an effort at it, especially if you go into crews that you don't necessarily have a lot in common with to start with. That can be a challenge, and you have to make an effort at it. So that's what I would say.
Cool. Thanks to you guys for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
It was a small group.
Truck
but
50B shift, thank you.
we had, that's all right. I think we had some good discussion, came up with some good stuff. Thanks for sending in your,
Thank you, Zoom World.
yeah, thanks for sending your comments, and we appreciate your time. We'll see you next time.